At my brother's engagement party, he smirked and dragged me over to his boss. "This is Cassandra, the family failure," he announced loudly, his voice dripping with mockery. My parents nodded along, their faces twisted in discomfort. "Such an embarrassment," my mom muttered, while my dad chuckled awkwardly. The room at the luxurious mountain lodge in Denver went dead silent. Snow was falling softly outside the massive windows, but inside the air felt thick and heavy. His boss, a sharply dressed man in his late 50s, didn't laugh. He just stared at my brother, at my parents, then at me. When Parker said my name, Cassandra, the man paused for a split second, his eyes narrowing just enough that I caught it. Something flickered across his face, too quick to name, but it made my stomach twist. Then he smiled, slow and calm. "Interesting," he said quietly, turning to my brother. "Parker, I'll see you in my office tomorrow morning." No one knew what to say. My brother's grin faltered. I stood there frozen, the humiliation burning through me like fire. Minutes later, I made an excuse about a headache and slipped out into the cold night, driving home alone with my hands shaking on the wheel. If you've ever been treated like the black sheep by your own family, hit that like button and subscribe right now. Stick around because this story gets insane. The next morning, I sat alone in my small house on the outskirts of Denver, staring at a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. Sleep had not come at all. Every time I closed my eyes, the image of Parker's smirk and the silence that followed his words played on repeat. I had been labeled the family failure for as long as I could remember. At 41, I owned and ran my own independent financial consulting firm from a modest office downtown. My specialty was corporate turnarounds, pulling mid-sized businesses back from the brink of collapse. The work was not glamorous. No one threw parties for quiet debt restructurings or discreet vendor negotiations, but it paid the bills. Over the past decade, I had built a reputation among owners who needed help without headlines. Clients trusted me because I delivered results quietly and effectively. My family never acknowledged any of it. To them, success meant visible titles, big offices, constant praise, and social media posts. Parker, 5 years younger, had always been the star, the one with easy charm, the marketing role at a growing logistics company, the fiancé from a good family. My parents doted on him endlessly. Every promotion, every new car, every vacation photo was framed and celebrated. My achievements received polite nods at best, usually followed by a sigh about how I should settle down or find something more conventional. 3 months before the engagement party, Parker called me out of the blue. "Sis, I need a favor," he said, his voice light as if he were asking for a ride to the airport. "Savannah and I are planning this thing at the mountain lodge, and I'm swamped at work. You're good at the boring stuff, right? Could you handle a few vendor contracts?" I should have refused, but he was my brother, and despite everything, that still carried weight. So I agreed to help a little. It started small, reviewing quotes from caterers and florists. Then I spotted serious problems. One contract Parker had already signed with the main event coordinator contained a clause that could have left him exposed to massive penalties if timing or deliveries went wrong. It was careless, the kind of error that could easily lead to a lawsuit if the vendor decided to enforce it. I spent 3 late nights on the phone renegotiating, getting the risky language removed, and securing better payment terms. Parker never asked what I had changed. He just said thanks and moved on. Then came the deposits. 2 weeks before the event, the photographer and the live band both sent reminders that payments were overdue and they were preparing to cancel. Parker had forgotten amid some work deadline. If those bookings fell through, the entire party would collapse. No professional photos for the big announcement, no music for the dances Savannah had planned so carefully. The lodge had strict rules, no refunds on the venue if key vendors pulled out. I wired the deposits myself. $8,000 for the photographer, another $6,000 for the band. I used money from a recent client retainer, telling myself I would sort it out later. Parker promised to pay me back immediately. "You're a lifesaver, Cass," he texted. The money never arrived. I kept working. The florist tried to add nearly $4,000 in premium charges that were not in the original bid. I caught it, called them directly, and forced a corrected invoice. The catering company quoted inflated rates for bar services. I negotiated them down by 20% after showing competitors' pricing. Every fix was done quietly from my home office, late at night or early morning so it would not interfere with my real clients. Parker never knew how close the whole event came to disaster. To him, everything simply worked out. At the lodge, he stood accepting compliments on how perfectly organized it all was, how professional the setup looked. Savannah smiled beside him, thanking him for making her vision come true. And then, in front of everyone, he dragged me forward and called me the family failure. If I had not stepped in, if I had not corrected his mistakes, covered his oversights, negotiated his bad deals, that party would not have happened the way it did. No photos, no music, possibly no venue at all. He would have looked incompetent in front of Savannah's family, his colleagues, and his future in-laws. But no one knew. Not Mom, not Dad, not Parker. They saw the smooth event and gave him all the credit. They saw me sitting quietly and assumed I had contributed nothing, as always. I had spent years proving them wrong in my own way, building a business that helped real companies survive real crises. Yet, in their eyes, I remained the disappointment, the one who never married, never boasted, never demanded attention. That morning, alone in my quiet kitchen, the weight of it pressed harder than ever. I had fixed everything for him again, and he had repaid me by humiliating me in front of a room full of people. For the first time, I seriously asked myself why I kept doing it, why I kept protecting someone who never once protected me. I stared at the cold coffee and realized something cold and clear. I had spent my entire adult life trying to earn a place in a family that had already decided I did not belong. Tuesday the following week, a sleek black SUV pulled up outside my small office in downtown Denver. I looked out from my desk and saw a man in his late 50s step out, dressed in a sharp navy suit, carrying a leather portfolio. Theodore Ramsey walked straight into the building without calling ahead. My assistant had not arrived yet, so I met him at the reception area myself. He took a moment to look around the space. Simple desk, organized filing cabinets, a few framed credentials and client testimonials on the wall, with clear respect in his eyes. Then he faced me directly, his expression serious yet approachable. "Mills," he said, offering a firm handshake. "Do you have time for a conversation?" I nodded, surprised but curious about why Parker's boss would show up unannounced. I guided him to the small conference table in the corner of the room. He sat down across from me, placed the portfolio on the table, and started without small talk. That evening at the Mountain Lodge, his voice even and measured, when your brother introduced you and mentioned your name, Cassandra, I did not connect it immediately. But the way you stood there, completely calm, no outward reaction, no attempt to defend yourself, it triggered something. On the drive home afterward, it all came back. He paused briefly, gauging my response. I remained silent, letting him continue. 15 years ago, I owned and operated a mid-sized logistics company based right here in Colorado. We had overexpanded, taken on heavy loans for new warehouses, signed unfavorable long-term contracts, and cash flow was disappearing fast. Bankruptcy filings were less than 2 months away. My father had died the previous year, leaving me the business in a vulnerable state, and I was on the verge of losing everything he had worked for. The details started coming back to me. It had been early in my career, one of the first projects I handled completely on my own. After going independent at 26, determined to establish my name in turnaround consulting, a young consultant contacted me directly. Theodore went on. No mutual connection, no discussion of fees up front. She spent weeks reviewing the full books at no charge, identifying every area where money was leaking, poorly negotiated freight routes, overpaid vendor agreements, hidden penalties in loan terms. She delivered a precise restructuring plan, prioritize creditor renegotiations, liquidate underperforming assets, cut operational redundancies without massive layoffs. He opened the portfolio and carefully slid an old report across the table. The cover page read, Cassandra Miles, Independent Financial Consultant, in the same clean format I still use today. Concise bullets, logical flow, no unnecessary wording. I've kept this all these years, he admitted, because you turned the company around without billing a single hour. When I insisted on paying you after implementation began showing results, you turned it down. You said you were just starting your practice and could not accept payment from someone facing a genuine crisis. Your approach reminded me of my own drive when I was younger. Focused, unflinching, no need for recognition. I looked at the faded pages. Memories surfaced of endless evenings analyzing spreadsheets, making cold calls to suppliers, drafting letters to banks for extensions. Ramsey Logistics, I said softly, connecting the dots fully. You consolidated routes and sold the excess fleet. He confirmed with a nod. Sold it at a profit 3 years later. Used those funds to invest wisely and grow sustainably. The larger operation I lead today traces directly back to your intervention. My entire career trajectory changed because of that unpaid assistance from a stranger who saw potential where I only saw collapse. He leaned in slightly. At the party, I recognized the same steady gaze of the person who helped me without expecting gratitude or acknowledgement, the quiet composure under pressure. The exact professional style in that old report matches everything about you. I was speechless for a moment. That project had been meaningful to me at the time, but clients moved on, and I had buried it among hundreds of others since. No one had ever brought it up again, let alone thanked me years later. Why come here now? I asked, genuinely wanting to know. He closed the portfolio gently. Because hearing how your own family described you did not match the person I knew had saved my business. The consultant who rescued me without fanfare is not a failure, and since Parker reports to me, I've been paying closer attention to certain patterns at work. He stopped there, not expanding further yet. The implication hung in the air, but he shifted to asking about my current practice instead. I described recent cases rescuing a family-owned distribution firm from foreclosure, guiding a regional supplier through supply chain disruptions. He listened attentively, asking thoughtful follow-up questions that showed real understanding of the field. We spoke for nearly an hour. The morning sunlight moved across the office walls as he shared brief updates on how the company had evolved since my involvement: new division, steady growth, community contributions. It felt strange but validating to have someone outside my family circle recognize the impact of my work. When he finally stood to leave, he extended his hand again. I'd value keeping in contact, Miss Miles, properly this time. I walked him out. As the SUV pulled away, a small shift settled inside me. Someone had seen the value I brought, not through boasts or demands, but through results that lasted. During that initial meeting and the several phone calls and in-person follow-ups that took place over the next few days, Theodore Ramsey shifted the conversation to the real reason he had sought me out, beyond the past connection. He explained that he had quietly initiated an internal audit at his logistics company approximately 10 months earlier, prompted by discrepancies in financial reporting that crossed departments. Parker had come under scrutiny early in the process. Theodore presented the evidence in a calm, organized manner, laying out printed reports, email chains, and annotated spreadsheets on the conference table. The most significant issue involved a high-value contract with a national retail chain for optimized shipping and distribution logistics. The project had been publicly credited to Parker as his personal initiative. He had delivered the final presentation, accepted congratulations from senior leadership, and received a substantial performance bonus along with the promotion recommendation. In reality, the core work had been performed by a junior analyst named Nathan Hayes. Nathan had spent 6 months researching market data, building financial models, and drafting the initial proposal. Parker had joined the team only in the final 2 months, then systematically took over credit. Email records showed him directing team members to send all updates through him personally. He then forwarded those updates to executives with slight rephrasings, presenting them as his own ideas. The commission tied to the deal amounted to $47,000, plus the added visibility that accelerated his career trajectory. That was only the beginning. Theodore opened another folder containing 18 months of expense reports. Parker had routinely submitted personal expenditures as legitimate business costs. A weekend trip to Las Vegas was documented as client development meetings with potential partners. A luxury hotel stay in Miami was labeled networking event coordination. High-end clothing purchases, suits, shoes, accessories were categorized as professional attire required for executive presentations. Even some preparatory costs for his engagement party, such as catering tastings and venue scouting visits, had been quietly billed to the company account. The total fraudulent charges exceeded $110,000. The pattern had started small, minor reimbursements that slipped through, and gradually grew bolder as no immediate questions arose. Theodore's forensic accounting team had cross-referenced every item against personal credit card statements, calendar entries, and travel itineraries. The mismatches were undeniable. I sat listening, a mix of disbelief and grim recognition settling in. Parker had always been quick to take shortcuts when it benefited him. Seeing the documented trail made the behavior impossible to dismiss as mere oversight. "Why share this with me specifically?" I asked during one of our later calls. Theodore responded thoughtfully. "Because I need someone I can trust to handle the next phase. We recently acquired 2 smaller subsidiaries, and the combined operation generates around $50 million in annual revenue. We're restructuring to eliminate redundancies, integrate systems, and ensure financial compliance. This requires an independent consultant with proven expertise in turnarounds, someone who prioritizes accuracy over politics." He slid the formal contract proposal across the table during our next in-person meeting. The terms were clear: a 6-month engagement, $250,000 in compensation, with provisions for extension based on results. The scope included auditing overlapping departments, recommending operational efficiencies, and overseeing the financial integration without bias. I reviewed the document carefully. The project would demand significant time, site visits, data analysis, stakeholder meetings, but the pay represented more than I typically earned in a full year. More importantly, it was an opportunity to apply my skills on a larger scale, working directly with an executive team that already respected my background. "I can't be involved in any decisions about Parker personally," I clarified. "You won't need to be," Theodore assured me. "The evidence is independent and will stand on its own. Your role would focus solely on the restructuring project." I took a few days to evaluate how the engagement would fit with my existing client load. I ran preliminary projections, considered the logistics of travel between Denver and the company's headquarters, and weighed the potential impact on my practice. The opportunity was substantial, and the trust Theodore placed in me felt validating in a way few things had. Before I signed, during our final call of the week, Theodore mentioned one additional point, almost casually. "While conducting the broader audit, my team noticed some unusual financial transfers that appeared unrelated to company business, but linked to family accounts. I've seen a few irregular patterns involving funds connected to people close to Parker," he said carefully, choosing his words. "Nothing conclusive at this stage, and I'm not ready to draw conclusions without full context, but it's something I felt you should be aware of." He left the statement open-ended, offering no specifics. The hint lingered in the air, suggesting there might be more beneath the surface than workplace misconduct alone. I did not press for details. The contract stood on its own merits. The next day, I signed the agreement and returned it electronically. Theodore expressed immediate appreciation and outlined next steps: initial data access, scheduled site visits, and an introductory meeting with key department heads. For the first time in years, a major professional opportunity had come to me because of my track record, not in spite of family perceptions. The work ahead promised challenge and growth, and I felt ready to step into it. A few weeks later, my phone buzzed with a number I hadn't saved but recognized immediately. I hesitated before answering. Parker's voice spilled out, strained and urgent. "Cass, we need to talk in person, please." We met at a small coffee shop downtown, away from both our offices. He arrived disheveled, shirt untucked, dark circles under his eyes, no trace of his usual confidence. Savannah wasn't mentioned. He launched right in after ordering nothing. They're closing in on the investigation. Expense reports, the retail contract, credit. It's getting serious. Theodore's people want corroboration from anyone familiar with my processes. I stayed silent, letting him continue. You've glanced at some of my work before, remember? Quick opinions on presentations. If you could just confirm to them that we bounced ideas off each other, that I consulted you on strategies, it would carry weight. Family backs, family casts. Always has. The plea in his voice was raw, almost convincing, if I hadn't heard versions of it growing up. I'm not going to lie, I said evenly. His expression hardened. You owe me that much. Mom and Dad have always pinned their hopes on me. You can't just watch this happen. I don't owe you lies, and I'm staying out of it. He gripped the table edge. This could end my career, the wedding, everything we've built, gone. You really want to be the one who lets that happen? I pushed my chair back. Your choices, Parker, not mine. He followed me to the door, his voice dropping. Think about what this does to the family. The contact escalated after that. Calls at odd hours, some from blocked numbers. Voicemails starting apologetic, turning accusatory, claiming I was jealous, that I'd always resented his success. Texts arriving in bursts, reminders of holidays I'd hosted, favors I'd done, now framed as debts he was calling in. Then the emails surfaced in the company's secure system, messages appearing to come from an address nearly identical to my professional one, a single character difference in the domain. The content was explicit, step-by-step suggestions on shifting personal costs to business lines, advice on reassigning team contributions in performance reviews. They were dated to suggest ongoing consultation, positioning me as complicit. I discovered them during a standard review of shared drives for my restructuring project. The timestamps were bunched, all created within a narrow evening window. The IP logs pointed directly to Parker's workstation. I documented everything meticulously, screenshots, exported metadata, access records. I forwarded the package to Theodore's compliance officer first, then confirmed my involvement when they requested a statement. The response was swift. I received an invitation to observe the disciplinary hearing from an observation room with one-way glass, given my contractor status and direct relevance. Parker entered the conference room looking composed at first, suit pressed, notes in hand. The panel included Theodore, the chief financial officer, HR Director Karen Fletcher, and in-house counsel Marcus Reeves. They proceeded methodically, projecting evidence on the screen, mismatched receipts, altered project timelines, and now the forged correspondence attempting to draw me in. He started with explanations, high-pressure deadlines leading to categorization errors, team dynamics where credit naturally flowed upward. When pressed on specifics, he shifted to emotion, voice cracking as he described stress from wedding planning and performance expectations. The panel remained unmoved. Karen Fletcher delivered the outcome professionally, immediate termination for gross misconduct, including fraud and attempted obstruction. The company would pursue civil recovery of all misappropriated funds, totaling over $110,000 through legal channels. Given the deliberate nature and scale, authorities would be notified for possible criminal prosecution. Security appeared promptly. Parker gathered his belongings into a standard box, escorted out through a side door. His face was blank as he passed the glass, unaware I was there. I left the building shortly after, driving home through familiar streets. No rush of victory surged through me, no satisfaction in seeing him fall, just a profound, icy relief, like exhaling after holding my breath for decades. The fallout was his to own, built from decisions he made without regard for consequences. I felt no urge to celebrate, only the quiet recognition that some patterns finally broke, leaving space for something cleaner. 2 months passed. An invitation arrived in the mail from Aunt Irene, handwritten, formal, requesting the entire family for dinner at her home in the Denver suburbs. She had always been the quiet observer on my mother's side, widowed early, living independently in the same house for decades. I almost declined, but the note included a personal line. "It's time we talked openly. Please come." The evening was cool when I arrived. Cars lined the driveway, my parents' sedan, Parker's SUV, vehicles belonging to 2 cousins and their spouses. Inside, the dining room table was set for 10, candles lit, the aroma of roast and potatoes filling the air. Aunt Irene greeted me at the door with a firm hug, her eyes sharp at 73. "Thank you for coming, Cassandra." Everyone else was already seated, Mom and Dad at one end, stiff postures, Parker beside an empty chair that must have been Savannah's. She wasn't there. Cousins Mark and Lisa with their partners exchanged uneasy glances. Dinner began politely, passing dishes, small talk about weather and holidays. Aunt Irene waited until plates were filled before standing at the head of the table. "I've asked you all here because I've stayed silent too long," she said, voice steady and clear. "This family has treated Cassandra like she doesn't matter for years. I'm done with that." Dad started to interrupt. "Irene, this isn't—" She raised a hand. "You'll listen tonight, George." She turned to the room. "Let me tell you about the niece you've ignored. 8 years ago, when I was diagnosed with cancer, the treatment costs exceeded my savings and insurance. I was ready to mortgage the house. Cassandra paid the remaining bills, over $40,000, without telling anyone. She sent the money through the hospital foundation, so I wouldn't know at first. I only found out when a thank you letter arrived addressed to her." Mom's fork paused midair. Parker stared at his plate. "When Mark lost his job during the recession and needed capital to start his landscaping business," Aunt Irene continued, looking at my cousin, "Cassandra provided the interest-free loan that got him through the first year. $20,000, repaid slowly over time, no pressure." Mark nodded slowly, eyes down. "She told me not to tell anyone." "And Lisa's husband," Aunt Irene went on, "when his tech startup was failing and they faced eviction, who covered 6 months of rent quietly? The same person." The room grew quieter. No one met my eyes. "But the worst," Aunt Irene said, voice tightening, "is what happened with your grandfather's education fund. He set aside money, specifically 1 share for each grandchild. Cassandra's portion was $50,000, intended for her college and early career. George and Barbara, you withdrew it all and redirected it to Parker's accounts for his private university tuition and first apartment." Dad's face reddened. "That money was invested for the child with more potential." Aunt Irene cut in. "You decided Cassandra had none, so you took what was hers." Mom's voice was weak. "We thought she'd manage on her own. She always did. Parker needed the boost to succeed." Parker spoke up defensively. "Times were tough. We all made sacrifices. Cassandra turned out fine anyway." Aunt Irene looked at him directly. "Fine? While you used her inheritance to build the life you flaunted, and now, after everything that's happened at work, you still sit here acting entitled." He shifted uncomfortably. "That's separate. Bad luck at the office." No one responded. The cousins exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable, but not contradicting her. Aunt Irene addressed the table again. "Cassandra never spoke up because she doesn't need validation from any of you. She built her life on her own terms, but I won't allow this family to keep calling her the failure." She sat down. The silence stretched. Dad cleared his throat, started to speak, then stopped. Mom dabbed her eyes with a napkin. Parker pushed food around his plate. I stayed quiet throughout. The revelations weren't new to me. I had known about the fund for a while now, but hearing them spoken aloud in front of everyone shifted something. Dinner ended awkwardly. People left soon after dessert. Murmurs of goodbyes. No lingering conversations. Aunt Irene walked me to my car. "I had to say it," she whispered. "For you and for the truth." I hugged her. "Thank you." Driving home, the words echoed. For once, someone had spoken for me when I hadn't asked. 1 year later, I made the decision final. I changed my phone number, updated all professional contacts, and set email filters to block anything from family addresses. Letters went unanswered. Social media connections severed. No explanations, no farewell messages, just silence. The restructuring project with Theodore Ramsey wrapped up successfully ahead of schedule. The integrated subsidiaries ran leaner, more compliant, and profitable. He offered an extension, an ongoing advisory role at the executive level with equity options. I accepted. My firm grew. New clients came through referrals from his network. For the first time, my work operated on a scale that matched my capabilities, free from old shadows. I moved into a larger office space downtown, hired 2 associates, and took on selective pro bono cases, helping small businesses in crisis the way I once started. The days felt purposeful, unburdened. Word filtered through distant channels about the others. Parker and Savannah separated quietly, then divorced. The legal recovery from the company drained his savings. Civil judgments piled on with interest. Job applications went nowhere. Background checks revealed the termination for fraud. He took contract gigs when he could, low-paying, unstable. Mom and Dad stayed in the same house, quieter now. Holidays passed without gatherings. Occasional updates from mutual acquaintances mentioned regretful conversations, attempts to reach out through cousins, messages I never received a second time. They aged visibly in photos I didn't seek out. Dad retired early, health complaints increasing. Mom volunteered more, filling empty hours. Neither found a way back into my life because I no longer left the door open. I didn't track their struggles closely. No satisfaction came from knowing the consequences, only the steady knowledge that my boundaries held. Some evenings, driving home through Denver streets, I thought about the years spent proving worth to people who refused to see it. The energy once poured into fixing things for others now fueled my own path. True kindness, I learned, finds its own direction when not twisted to earn approval. Toxic favoritism eventually consumes itself, leaving those who practiced it isolated in the ruins. Cutting ties completely wasn't cruel. It was the only way to protect what I'd built and keep moving forward without carrying their weight anymore.